Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 107 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. It's our Sweet 16 and Elite 8 recap. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade and Mike Koomar with me today. And guys, after all that, we've got 4 seeds in the Final Four, 3 of which were correctly predicted by Mike. Joe, we both got 1. Could have been worse. Better than 0 last year, but we have got 4 teams left. It's the 4 seeds. And let's go region by region here and how we got here. A couple of interesting games in the Sweet 16. And the West region, Florida rolls past Maryland. This was one of the 2 games for Florida. They looked really good in this one, Mike. And they kind of just rolled over a Maryland team, which had a few things going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I certainly didn't see this coming. I thought Maryland would put up a lot better fight, but like you said, I think the distractions were clearly imminent for the Terps. The Crab Five clearly did not have the game that we thought that they had, but the keys of the game, going into it, we thought, man, the rebounding was terrible against Colorado State. That's something that they've got to overcome, and they got more than doubled on the boards. 42 rebounds for Florida compared to 20 by the Terps, and that was really the story of the game were Florida's ability to get on the glass and get buckets. And clearly, this was a distracted Maryland team, and they've got to figure out a new coach now. But not a great game.
And Joe, the news was not exactly surprising when it came out. It was pretty clear that Willard was going to go to Villanova over the past week. But having watched Maryland all year, this was really the first time where their lack of depth seemed to matter. Gillespie fouls out. Miguel with 4 fouls and 0 points. I guess it was eventually going to come. I mean, they went pretty much the whole season with 5 players, and unfortunately, when you play an elite team like Florida, you've got to be pretty close to perfect, and they weren't.
Yeah, not even close. And the fact that their bench, I believe, took 1 shot, which was a make at least by Deshaun Harris-Smith. Going into the game, Maryland's bench shot 100%. I would have been a bit skeptical, but I was like, that probably means they have a chance. Clearly, they had none. I think the more exciting part of this game, to be honest with you, Shaw, was the build-up and people booing Kevin Willard. I thought that was probably more interesting than the game itself. By people, I mean Maryland fans. I need to be more specific there.
Yep,
So
in the hotel, in the team hotel.
yeah, it would kind of have to be out of a Hollywood movie where Maryland pulled this off. Like, they were so mad at their own coach who was coaching them that they won this game. So I never really saw a path to victory. I thought they were competitive. I think Derek Queen is. I think if I came with one positive takeaway from Maryland, Derek Queen is a phenomenal player. Under Armour should do whatever the heck they can to keep him there. They're clearly not going to. He's going straight to the league. But yeah, good for Derek Queen. Not good for the rest of the Maryland faithful or.
May have had a.
Sean paused. Yep, Sean paused for a bit.
We're back.
But
Sorry, we're back.
I'm all done. Yep,
Okay.
I'm all done, Sean.
Well, game 2 in the West region was a little bit more interesting. We had Arkansas and Texas Tech, and it looked like Coach Cal and the Hogs were going to the Elite 8, up 13 with 4 minutes left, but not quite. Texas Tech turns it around. They force overtime, and they get across the line. Mike, how about this comeback from Texas Tech? They fell behind. They looked down and out. But Grant McCaslin did not lose belief in his guys, and they scrapped this one out of almost nothing.
What a tale of 2 finishes for Texas Tech between the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. This game looked over. I turned my eyes off it at about the 8-minute mark. Got back in for overtime, and what a thrilling overtime that was. Back and forth the whole way. A lot of controversy about Calipari not calling a timeout to let his team run a set with 7.5 seconds to go in this game. Calipari has typically not, and historically not called that timeout and let his players play out. He went with his gut to not do that. They got a bad look at a shot, and Tech goes to the Elite Eight. But this game was a thrilling game, probably the best game in the Sweet 16.
And Joe, we had Darion Williams, 8 for 26, not very good on the stats wise, but considering he was, I think 4 for 20 or 4 for 19 at one point, he made the shots when it counted. He got his team to overtime, 2 for 10 from three. I think he made his last two. But Texas Tech got away with one here, and they survived and advanced.
Yeah, I thought another storyline in this, Sean, was kind of the older players. Janelle Davis, I thought probably carried Arkansas. I know you look at the stat line, 8 of 22, but very effective. Made a lot of plays. Carter Knox obviously is the main one that stands out as well. Um, it's hard to like. Obviously, I want to give credit to Texas Tech, and they deserve it. But Arkansas completely freaked this game. Let's just call it what it is, Sean. I think that Calipari was smart to load this roster with guys that were experienced. Obviously an Adu, Janelle Davis, even a DJ Wagner, even a Visich as well. But I think too much. These guys hadn't really been in the moment clearly, and it showed. And I think Calipari, if he wants to get title number two, that's eluded a lot of great coaches. One we'll talk about later. He's going to have to alter the formula a bit. I don't like that he was so stubborn saying, I'm not going to change anything. I think that's really foolish.
Yeah, the 9 scholarship players this year is a move that there's no way he makes that mistake again. They had some injuries. They were down to the bare bones of that squad. Thiero came back. He really wasn't a part of this game, just 5 minutes. But again, the end of the day, they leaned on their players who had been in situations like that before, Davis and Adu, really the only two on the roster, and they brought them a lot further than many people thought. But the lesson for Arkansas and a lot of these other teams is don't play so bad in the regular season so you can get a better seed. But
Even for Arkansas going into the season, if you asked Arkansas fans what would be a good year, I think they would all said if we got to a Sweet 16, that would be a great year. They had their entire roster gutted after Coach Musselman left. So to be able to make the Sweet 16 with all the obstacles this team has had, I think that's a win. And you're going to see a lot more success come out of this program.
And Arkansas is a program, at least in the time that we've been watching, that has kind of gotten everything out of their seasons in terms of tournament runs. And I don't think this is any different. I mean, they got to the Elite Eight with a 6 seed, and Musselman went on some good runs there. But it seems like Calipari, at least for now, has shaken off that bad luck in the March Madness. But how about the Elite Eight game in the West region? Talk about a great comeback in the Sweet 16 for Texas Tech, and quite a big collapse. Walter Clayton in Florida steal this one, Joe. They win at 84-79. They looked down and out here. They were down by double digits in the second half. We had Texas Tech leading by 9 with 3:14 remaining. We had three-pointer, stop, three-pointer, stop, three-pointer. And all of a sudden we were tied with 1:47 remaining. Joe, have you seen sort of I don't think we've seen not necessarily a collapse here, but just a total resurgence of a team that was supposed to win, that came in, looked like they were going to lose, and then they just flipped the switch and got right back in the game.
The only game this reminds me of, and selfishly, it's a Michigan one in 2013 where Trey Burke single-handedly took down Kansas. It felt like
there's a lot of Trey Burke and Walter Clayton.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those two have a lot of the same characteristics. Into this one, Sean, this is not to discredit Florida, by the way. If you're in the Final Four and I'm discrediting you, it's like a slight discredit. It's like picking one flaw in Miss America. It's really like trivial. One thing I'll say, though, is I hate saying this in front of two golf guys. This was their mulligan, Sean. You're not going to be able to win a national title with this type of performance. The fact it came against a really, really good Texas Tech team was surprising. That's why you have guys like Walter Clayton. I think the perfect recipe at a college basketball team is Florida, guys that have played heavily at one school, being Iona, then, adapted to the SEC, and then this is their takeover year. This is why, because in a tournament, you're likely I think UConn was deceptive the last 2 years. They didn't really have a crazy struggle in any of these big games. Florida struggled, and if they end up winning the national title, this was their struggle game. And the only reason they got through, I'm going to be honest, at the end was Walter. So really good on them for getting him, developing him, and getting to stay a second year, something not a lot of teams have done. And frankly, in the offseason, I'm sure we all can debate whether a certain player stayed in the school for another year, what could have happened, who knows. But really good on Florida and Todd Golden and the rest of the staff there.
Yeah, Mike, before I ask you about Texas Tech, I saw Walter Clayton in the MAC at Iona pretty up close. He did not start his freshman year. He had about 7 points off the bench, if I had to guess, and he was really sort of just like a guy who they'd throw in there and get a little burst out of, and then he'd come out. Sophomore year, he made a huge jump to MAC Player of the Year, and with the Pitino, him leaving, it was kind of expected that he'd go to St. John's. He ends up picking Florida over them. They get to the tournament last year, somewhat underwhelmed in the round of 64, and then this year, I don't think there's been such a transformation from freshman year to senior year. I mean, there's a couple in the age of the transfer portal, but I haven't seen a guy improve this much in college, and he's gonna go in the NBA draft, and a 0-star recruit to a MAC school doesn't usually go in the NBA draft. So I think Walter Clayton has been an unbelievable player. He's probably second place in SEC Player of the Year. Obviously, a player from another team that got to the Final Four won that award. But what a transformation for Clayton. And Mike, year two for Grant McCasland finishes 28-9. They finish in the Elite Eight. They're predicted ninth in the conference, but pretty clear that Texas Tech made the right move so far, and we should see them back here next year.
Yeah, great season for Tech, but I think Tech fans are going to feel sick about this game and probably still do. Joe equated this game to 2013 Michigan against Kansas. I'm going to go back a little bit further, probably before y'all were watching basketball. I don't think I've seen a bigger choke since Arizona gave up a 15-point lead to Illinois in the last 3 minutes in the 2004 Elite Eight game. One of the first games I ever remember watching in an Illini household. But it wasn't just that they were making stops. Florida sent Tech players to the foul line, and Tech players missed the front end of a 1-and-1
Twice.
2 times. And in the game, Tech finished 7-13 from the free throw line. It's really more like 7-15 when you throw in that they missed the front end of those two 1-and-1s, which are effectively turnovers. If Tech makes 4 free throws there, they're going to the Final Four. They're going home. They're playing in front of a home crowd in San Antonio. And the Big 12 is looking real good right now. But regardless, this is one of the biggest chokes of the last 20 years in college basketball. To end your season like that's got to be sickening. Tech fans have felt it after they got stunned against Virginia in the last 10 seconds of the national championship game in 2019, but this is no different. But look, at the end of the day, McCasland's been an outstanding hire by Tech, and he's going to continue to recruit well there. He talks about how well he thrives out in West Texas. And Texas Tech, people don't really talk about it. They've got tremendous resources out there. They've got an incredible endowment, a good alumni base, some good oil money out there in West Texas. And there's no excuse that that program won't be a top 15, top 20 program for years to come. And I do believe McCasland will get back to the Final Four.
All right, well, that's the West region. Florida comes out as the number one seed. Let's turn things over to the East, the Newark, New Jersey region. And in the Sweet 16 games, guys, the ball was going in the basket. We had Alabama dropping 113 on BYU. BYU decided to go under a lot of screens. Not sure that was the best idea. And then we had Duke and Arizona combined for 193. Let's go to Joe first for Alabama BYU. It was clear to me early on that this one was going to be a track meet, and BYU just couldn't keep up. Alabama runs them out of the gym.
I thought BYU, contrary to what a lot of bettors and a lot of other people think, played pretty well. I thought their fatal flaw was what you mentioned, Sean. It's been a fatal flaw with my teams in the past, a lot of teams in the Big Ten where they go under these damn screens, and BYU, it was just tough to watch because part of it was pulling for them, and they did it against Wisconsin. You kind of saw it. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for them in that game, Wisconsin's not quite the three-point shooting team that Alabama is, so they were able to get away with it. But when I say get away with it, it was just barely. I mean, they had firm control of that Wisconsin game. Then the last 6 minutes kind of let the Taji show and others take over that game. Had Wisconsin had a few better shooters, BYU's not even in this game. So I think you probably saw the Easter eggs or the writing on the wall from there. But I thought overall for BYU, just kind of eulogizing their season real quick, really solid year. I think any Cougar fan who said Sweet 16 in year one I think they'd be really happy. And I think the pressure was on Alabama to win this game, and the fact they did it running away was a really impressive performance.
Yeah, 25 of 51 from the 3-point line. That was an NCAA tournament record. We had Mark Sears with 10 of his own, which tied the record, I believe. So, Mike, I think BYU can expect good things in the future. They have the number one recruit. But being that these teams played two similar styles, there was a way BYU could have won this game. They had a really rough day from the three, 6 for 30. Well, Alabama was 25 for 51, and ultimately that's why it wasn't close.
Yeah, Sean, when we talked about this game last week, what I was saying is Alabama plays BYU style basketball just a little bit better. And then today, excuse me, on Thursday, they shot the ball a whole lot better than BYU did, and that was the difference between these two teams. Look, if Alabama shoots the ball like they did on Saturday, this is probably a whole lot closer of a ball game. But at the end of the day, BYU left a lot of wide open threes by going under screens, as y'all talked about. It's a big issue with defense across college basketball between that and not hedging screens. Apparently, that's not a thing anymore. But BYU is going to come away with this as an A+ season. It's their first Sweet 16 in 14 years after they replaced what they thought was going to be their generational coach. So this is a huge win for them and a hell of a transition into the Big 12. This team was not a good West Coast Conference basketball team. They weren't even going to the NCAA tournament. They were like the fifth, sixth best team in the West Coast Conference. So for them to make this transition to the Big 12 has been very impressive.
Yeah, Pope in year one makes it as a 6th seed, and then Young does the same thing in year one of his own. So good things on the horizon for BYU. In game 2 out there in Newark, Duke 100, Arizona 93. Duke was mostly in control for this one. Arizona had a couple of pushes. Could they make this close? Caleb Love goes out with a heroic game, 35 points for the former North Carolina Tar Heel. But Mike, Duke was a class above everybody that they've played in the NCAA tournament. And, we have Flag with 30 here, Knipple with 20, Sion James with 16, Malawak with 13. It was, Duke was dominant in this one. And while it took a heroic Caleb Love game to make this thing even close.
Yeah, Caleb Love against Duke. I don't know. There's just something about it. But at the end of the day, uh, getting into this, when we previewed the East region, Sean, I said this was going to be kind of like the Duke Invitational,
Yeah.
and it certainly felt like that. They had a pretty easy road the whole way, dominant against Baylor. They only won this game by 7 points, but they were pretty dominant the entire way, and then it was kind of a bloodbath in the Elite Eight. So Duke's got to be feeling more confident than anybody going into the Final Four with how well they've been blowing out teams. I think they've definitely had the easiest road out of all the teams, especially with how much of an off night Alabama had against them, but it's still very impressive the way that they've been able to play basketball with a different group of guys without 100% Cooper Flag, and even at times a Cooper Flag in foul trouble, and they've thrived. So Duke, if you started picking March Madness right now, you might pick Duke to be your national champion if you hadn't already.
All right, Joe. Well, that Elite Eight game was more of the same for the Blue Devils. They end up stretching it to 20. It was pretty similar without a late flurry from the Arizona game, and they were dominant. They were always in control, and they end up sort of bringing it to Alabama. Very similar game here. You had 4 starters in double digits. Proctor has raised his game. Knipple has raised his game. Cooper Flag is Cooper Flag. Malawak is a really good rim protector. They essentially shut off the water at the rim, and they make you make shots, and nobody has done that in quite a while against Duke. So Duke Invitational turned out to be correct, and the Blue Devils are headed to the Final Four.
Yeah, Sean, I'm not going to even comment too much. The one Duke, the way they've played, especially this weekend. When you think of UConn last year, they maybe leave the door a little cracked and then they just slam it shut repeatedly. You get a little defense
Sorry, fellas. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Sorry, we're back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, we talk a lot about this, Sean, with Big Ten ball and like second chance points and whatnot. Duke doesn't allow that. Yep, Sean, you're back. Duke Duke does the little things right as well as the flashy things. And I think most people pay attention to the flashy things. The reason they can do so many flashy things, Sean, is because they do the little things perfectly, and that's why they have four starters. Because Sean,
Yeah.
I didn't finish
I
my
don't know
piece
what's
on Duke,
happening.
so yeah.
Might try and reset here, but keep going, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just finishing saying Duke. Duke does the little things right, and that's why they do the flashy things because they've earned the right to, quite frankly.
Yep, they've got length, they've got good rim protection, they've got pretty good perimeter pressure. It seems like it might be Duke's year, but we've got two more regions to go. But first, let's take a look at some of our games that we ran in March Madness here, and we have got two updates that we're going to make. First, we've got our Survivor pool. It did wrap up today. We had James Schneider winning. So he gets that prize. We had about 13 people in this. This was kind of a last-minute thing that we threw together. But we both went out, or all three of us went out a little bit earlier. We are going to be running a bracket pool, Masters pool on the same site, so be sure to look out for that in the next week or so. And we have an ESPN Tournament Challenge update here. And we've got an Auburn pick winning it all, and there's Mike in second with Florida. So if the Gators win it all, Mike will win. We've got a couple Duke picks in here, and then we do have a Houston pick all the way down here for Joe. So you guys are still both alive. I do have Florida, and I am behind Mike, and I cannot catch him. So if Florida wins, I'm out of luck. But you two both alive in the tournament challenge pool. So we are showing up against our followers, which is good for us. All right, we've got two more regions to go here. We're going to go out to the Midwest, Indianapolis, and the Houston Cougars, who were by far the furthest team away from Lucas Oil Stadium. Coming into the tournament, they wanted to go to the West. The committee said, no, you're going to go to the Midwest. And this was kind of the exact reason why. They get Purdue, which is 60 miles away in the Sweet 16, and then they get Tennessee in the Elite Eight, who's closer. But, Joe, let's go to you first for Purdue and Houston. The Boilers not expected to really battle here against Houston, but they lead by 2 at halftime, and they find themselves in a really close game at the end. But Houston gets a incredible inbound play, and they win it by 2. But, Joe, had to be impressed with how Purdue hung in there with Houston here.
A night where the starters didn't particularly shoot well, especially from three. The fact Camden Heide goes 3 of 6 from 3-point land. Definitely not on my bingo card. Probably 99% of Purdue fans did not have that on theirs either. I think they needed something like that to keep them in this game, and luckily for them, they did. Because I didn't think they get as much production out of a Miles Colvin either, or a. I thought mainly it had to be an unsung starter like a Fletcher Lawyer going off, and I thought he played really well. But the fact they had extra help from Heide and Colvin, two guys who've been criticized a lot by Big Ten fans and certainly Purdue fans all year, I thought was a very good sign. I think just to make it pretty simple, Sean, I thought Braden Smith probably had to play a lot better. Houston did a really good job limiting him. I'm not putting this all in the hands of Braden Smith or Matt Pater, because Houston's game plan defensively clearly centered around the Big Ten Player of the Year. Pretty good idea overall by Sampson, but I think they probably needed to give him a few more chances, and that was ultimately the difference. I don't think they lost the game just because of the last play, to be completely honest with you.
And Braden, he was 2 for 7 from the field. He just didn't get a lot of looks. He did have 15 assists. And that is sort of this Houston scheme, is to sort of really hedge or even blitz some of the screens, make Braden spray it. I thought Purdue was a good enough passing team where they got enough good looks when they short rolled it and zipped it around. And that's sort of why those shots fell into the hands of the other players. And they did enough to get them in the game. Thought Coffin Wren really had to work for his 14. And Houston found themselves in a game. And without an offensive superstar, Mike, Houston has found themselves losing these types of games. But they get Milos Uzan from Oklahoma, and his shot making proved to be the difference, which is why this Houston team, I think, is a little better than years past.
Usually their offensive firepower comes from LJ Cryer. He was off in this game, just 2 of 13, 1 of 5 from behind the arc. At the end of the day, I think what won it for Houston was their physicality. They're one of the most physical teams in college basketball. They proved it here. One of two teams that are in the top 10 in Ken Palm, both offense and defense. And this was a big off night on the offensive end. Sharp and Uzan were able to get the job done for the Cougars, but at the end of the day, a hell of a last play to give them a chance to play in the Elite Eight. I don't think there's a team that earned their way into the Final Four more than Houston did, especially with having to play better quality opponents and basically playing 2 straight road games against Purdue and against Tennessee today. Absolutely dominant against Tennessee, but the Cougars, I think, are going to put up a hell of a fight against Duke come Saturday.
And let's talk about that final play, guys. It was a ISO for Milos Uzan against Braden Smith, an awful lot of elbow push off there. I think it was probably an offensive foul. Again, the old saying is, you got to let the players play at the end of the game. I think there's no doubt that's a call earlier in the game. Shot goes up, he misses. Purdue still should have grabbed the rebound. They don't. It goes out of bounds, and then Kelvin Sampson, with one of the best X's and O moments of recent memory, I think, draws it up. We've seen Purdue do this, Joe, on under out of bounds this year, where they leave the inbounder. It seemed like Houston knew that, got it right back to the inbounder, and Uzan laid it in. But thoughts on the potential push-off and then the X's and O masterclass from Kelvin Sampson? Mike, you can go first.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's unfortunate, but unless it's like blatant fouls aren't called in the last 5 seconds of the game, whether you like that or not, that's just the way that it is.
I think there would be more of an argument if he made the shot, he missed it, and you didn't get the rebound.
Yeah, no, they're not going to call any fouls offensively or defensively right there. With that being said, listening to Kelvin Sampson after the game, that is a play that they practiced the day before in practice. They've gone over it. It's the second and third reads. They made the right read, and what a bucket. What a way to end the game. Couple of thrilling games in the Sweet 16 that involved the Big 12, but this one was an exciting one for sure.
And, Joe, we've seen Purdue sort of change their defensive philosophies this year with the lack of a rim protector. They were really poor two-point defense this year. In fact, one of the worst in the country. They did well enough here. They were 14 of, they were well under 50%, actually better from 3 than they were from 2. So Purdue brought it on that front. But that's why they try and jump passing lanes and cause turnovers, because they know they don't have the best two-point defense. And unfortunately, that did cost them in the end. But thoughts on that final play?
Officiating, I thought if there was a call they could get, it's because it was in Indianapolis. I thought the fact they didn't
they got some earlier.
Yeah, I'm just going to say the fact that Purdue and Indianapolis didn't get calls needs to be a warning to everyone, saying you have to play through it. And I'm not going to blame. We don't need to go on a rant about this. We could talk about that when we kind of eulogize Purdue's season in our review, Sean. But one thing I will say for Purdue all year, I kind of felt like the Spider-Man meme, not the pointing one, but the one where he's holding back the train, Tobey Maguire, 2004. Sorry for anyone who hasn't seen that. You can just look it up, where he's like, they're doing everything they can. I think, fortunately, in the movie, they stopped the train again, not real life, so it's fine. Unfortunately for Purdue, I don't think they had – I thought they had just too little strength at the end of the defense to hold up. And to be honest with you, Sean, if this game went to overtime, I think Houston would have broken through, and the score probably would have been even more of a – not lopsided, but I think Houston would have taken over like 2 or 3 minutes into overtime, unless Braden Smith just started spraying threes.
Coffin Wren had 4 fouls, so assuming he probably gets 5 there, they wouldn't have a chance. But it was unfortunate for Purdue for that to end them, I think, because they were right there. And they gave themselves a chance again for this Purdue team to get to the Sweet 16. I think is pretty not remarkable because they are a good team, but like if this was supposed to be a transition year for them, and they're still getting to the second weekend, so good things for the Boilers in the future. We had Kentucky and Tennessee round 3, game 2 here, or this one was first actually, but Kentucky wins the first 2 meetings by making a lot of threes. Tennessee makes the necessary adjustments. Kentucky just goes 6 for 15. Tennessee ran them off, forced them inside. And the Vols here, Mike, were pretty dominant over a team that's beat them twice. A little bit shocking from my side here.
Yeah, neither team shot the ball particularly well in this game, but at the end of the day, Tennessee just dominated. They were plus 10 on the boards, plus 7 in the assist column, plus they actually lost turnover battle in this one, but never was there a doubt in this game that Tennessee was going to lose. They jumped on Kentucky right away, and it was able to limit Kentucky from getting quality shots. And that's part of what's made Tennessee so successful this year. And a conference that runs through offense, Tennessee's probably the best defensive team in the conference. And that's how they've been able to win ball games this year in the SEC. But Kentucky never really had a chance in this one.
And here in the Elite Eight between Houston and Tennessee, Joe, Houston gets out to a big lead, 20 plus in the first half. Tennessee, all of their shot making left for them in the Sweet 16. Just 15 points in the first half for the Vols, and they did get it to 10 or 9 in the second half, but Houston pretty dominant here on their way to the Final Four. But again, 2 true road games in a football stadium with more capacity than the rest of the regions for Houston, and it doesn't seem to give them any problems here as they beat a pretty good Tennessee team here by 19.
Yeah, I think beats the politically correct version because there's a lot of other words that come to mind. That was a beatdown for the beginning shot. I thought Tennessee was lucky that Chaz Lanier and Jordan Gainey, who again played really well in the Sweet 16, had the games they had because the score could have been a lot uglier. The fact it was less than 20, kind of a credit to Tennessee. I don't think they quit at all. I think Slick Rick Barnes, certainly a really good year overall. It's just kind of a theme we're going to see. They just ran into a buzzsaw in Houston, and I think probably the blowout part is disappointing. The result part can't be. I think this was. I mean, I was shocked the spread was 2.5. To be honest with you, I thought Houston was going to be anywhere 5.5 to 7.5. But I digress, Sean. Really impressive by Houston. Tennessee shot making. I think a large part of that was on their part, just like taking like rush shots too. So credit to Houston there, but I definitely think Tennessee just lost this game in the first half. To be completely real, Sean. I think after that, no one really needed to watch.
Oh, that's 3 regions down, 3 1 seeds into the Final Four, and we've got one more region here. Friday night in Atlanta, we started out with Michigan against Auburn. Joe, and your Wolverines were leading by 8 in the second half, and sort of exactly how the script flipped against Texas A&M. Auburn does that to them in the Sweet 16. Again, big picture, still a great year for Michigan, but unfortunately the wall for this season came with about 8 minutes left in the second half. But Auburn takes over, another buzzsaw.
Yeah, Sean, I think the difference was Michigan had to pull away in hindsight. And a lot of people are going to blame that.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to blame the 20-2 run and what really seemed like 200-2 as a Michigan fan, to be honest with you, Sean. I think people are going to point at that and say that was it. I think that was probably a symbol of what it was, to be honest with you. The real theme was we couldn't bury these guys. There'd be times you're up 5-7, and then it got as high as 8 or 9, and we would just turn it over, leave guys wide open for 3, go under screen, stuff that plagued us in the first Purdue loss, stuff that plagued us against Michigan State. And unfortunately in that run, it all came came pouring out. And, Auburn, they're the number 1 overall seed for a reason. They certainly earned their home court advantage in Atlanta. That was 70% Auburn fans. Do not get it twisted, probably plus the 10% Michigan State fans who were cheering against their rival. All I'm going to say is for our next recap, be careful what you wish for. But Auburn made threes in this stretch, and they were taking a lot of good shots. They just were hitting them. At Michigan, the fact they couldn't get out to a bigger lead was because of the turnovers. Auburn did a masterful job guarding Vlad Golden. Danny Wolf, as great of a game as he had, the same issues all year plagued him at the end: turnovers, reckless dribbling, and it kind of uh, put more pressure on the guards in that stretch, and it kind of showed that Michigan's guards are not that elite quite yet. So, really good performance by Auburn, especially those last 8 minutes. Good performance by Michigan for 32 minutes. The last eight are probably what's going to be reviewed a lot in Chrysler Center during practice, starting in about probably 3 months, sadly.
All right, game two in the Sweet 16, Mike. Michigan State 73, Ole Miss 70. The same script for the Spartans, sort of all tournament. Start off slow. Other team doesn't bury you. You come back and win. Happened against New Mexico. Happened here against Ole Miss. And we had some great shot making from Jace Richardson and Jaden Akins down the stretch here. Sean Padula, 24 points. Good effort from Chris Beard. And the Sweet 16 for Ole Miss is something that is probably a bigger deal than they'd like to admit. It's been almost 20 years since they've been to the Sweet 16 here. But at the end of the day, Tom Izzo and his Spartans get across the line. But really good game, this one.
Yeah, this was a really terrific game. Another great one in the Sweet 16. What it came down to was Michigan State, like they have for the last several games in the tournament, they were able to close this game, close it down. Ole Miss, how they were able to do in the first two games was they just punched their opponent in the mouth and then kind of just coasted at the end. They did it against North Carolina, and then same against Iowa State, where they got out to a huge lead and were able to coast. They were not able to get out to too big of a lead. And Michigan State's just a second half team all year. I'm sure y'all have seen it a lot, constantly in the Big Ten. Michigan State, not a good shooting team, but they're going to find a way to stay in a game and get the job done. And I think also for Ole Miss, it's pretty tough to win deep in March when you're only playing about seven guys deep. And that's what they did most of the entire season. They did it again today or excuse me, on Friday, and they weren't able to get the job done. Without being said, it's an A-plus season for Ole Miss. Now it's just going to be a matter of if they can keep Chris Beard in Oxford. I'm sure he's very grateful for a second chance from Ole Miss, but will he hop for another job pretty soon? Who knows?
All right, well, that leaves Auburn and Michigan State in the Elite Eight. And Joe, again for Michigan State, another tough start. They fall behind. They are down by 9 at halftime, which I think Michigan State and their fans were happy with, that they were only down 9. They had a couple of bursts in the second half, but ultimately Auburn did bury them. So then the late push from Michigan State wasn't enough. But Auburn's class was, unfortunately, they had just more talent on the floor. Janai Broom, 25 and 14, while battling a shoulder/elbow injury. That didn't look good. That's something to look out for in the future. Michigan State really struggled from the field. They continued to drive it right into the shot blockers rather than hitting a floater or a mid-range. But just seemed like at the end of the day, Auburn was probably not a great matchup for Michigan State. They dug themselves a hole, and unfortunately they weren't able to get out of it. But Auburn, deserving winners of the South region for me.
Yeah, Sean, I think for MSU to have won this game, they needed a lot better performance from Jaden Akins. I thought Jace Richardson was limited, even though he put up good stats. I think he didn't see him drive with the same conviction that he did most of this tournament and late in the Big Ten season, which really made Michigan State separate itself from the pack of the conference. The role players, aside from Frankie Fidler and Jackson Kohler, the depth they normally get. Trey Holloman, for example, 0 of 11, 3 turnovers. I don't think that was on my bingo card. I thought he probably was good for 8 to 10 points. That really hurt them. And Sean, let's face it, the two fatal flaws all year: slow starts and bad shooting against the number one overall seed in a road game. It's going to catch up with you. And like Michigan, their fatal flaws were turnovers and too much stagnant offense. That buried Michigan late. I think Michigan State buried itself earlier. I certainly thought after the 23-8 start to the game, they outplayed Auburn. I thought had that been less of a deficit, Michigan State probably wins this game. And I bet that Jedi Broom injury, I know that came with 10 minutes, and Auburn had about a 10 to 12 point lead at that stage of the game. Had MSU gone on had that only been like 17-8 or something, that injury probably lingers a lot larger. And do they rush Broom out there? That's a bunch of questions we're never going to know the answer to. Overall, though, Sean, like Mike said, I think, like Mike said for Ole Miss and I said for Michigan, this was a fantastic season for Michigan State basketball. This was a team that I think Tom Izzo, you always expect them to be respectable and competitive in March. I don't think that before the year going to the Elite Eight and losing to the number one overall seed would disappointed a lot of people. Certainly, the performance disappoints people. But should they keep a Jace Richardson and keep a lot of these role players that are non-seniors? Um, could Michigan State repeat as Big Ten regular season champions? There's a whole offseason to talk about that, but I think the future looks a lot brighter for the Spartans than it did last year when their probably most hyped up team fell flat on their face for most of the year.
And Mike, this is sort of a general question, but for these, like, it's taking good performances at least one of the two times in this regional for the one seeds to get through. Like, they haven't been great every game, but I think this was just a really good game from Auburn. Michigan State probably had to make more shots to win, but I don't really think that any of these one seeds, other than Duke, really were way, way better than the opponents. They just executed better. They got themselves a lead, and ultimately, it's hard enough to outplay one of these one seeds from 0-0, let alone down 10 or 15. But Auburn gets through, and I think they were just the better team for Michigan State here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. There was a legitimate chance that we did not have a single team from the SEC in the Final Four, which would have been pretty crazy. But look, at the end of the day, Michigan scores more than 6 points in an 8-minute stretch, and we don't see the biggest collapse in Elite Eight in 20 years. Yeah, we've got a couple ones that are going home early. With that being said, I think if there was a year where we had number one seeds going in to the Final Four, this was going to be the year. We haven't seen a year where there was such a disparagement in talent among the top teams in a while. So we'll see how college basketball is going to keep going, but I think in the age of NIL, we're going to see a little bit more of this than we'd like to.
And the top of Ken Pom is about as elite as it's ever been since the database started in 2002. Duke is the best team ever in Ken Pom since 2002. 3 points better than the next team, which is also this year, too, in Houston. And then you've got Auburn and Florida, who would be the number one team every other year, except for like 4 or 5. So the analytics are supporting the fact that the best teams are better than they've ever been, and unfortunately for the chaos part of March Madness, that sort of nulled that this time around. But we've got those 4 teams in the Final Four: Duke, Houston, Florida, and Auburn. Duke and Houston will play, and then Florida and Auburn. We'll preview both those games later in the week, but thank you everybody for tuning in to this episode as our Sweet 16 and Elite 8 recap. We'll see you next time.